So now what we're going to do is learn how to stream our data via the internet to a website called ThingSpeak. And to do this, we're going to need a new chip. This is a Wi-Fi chip. Again, it's made by Seed Studio again. And it's got two buttons on it. And it's kind of something that kind of looks like an antenna because it's transmitting information. And it's just like all the other chipsets that we have, is it just plugs in with a 4-pin cable. And kind of like our OLED screen and light sensor and things like that, is it can only be plugged into one spot. This one needs a serial port that goes in and out. So it needs a transmission and it needs to receive, right? Just like a normal internet connection, it needs to send information and it also needs to receive information. And the only pin and ports on your shield that enable that to happen is P15 and P13. It's the one that is right underneath the power. So we're going to always plug in our Wi-Fi chip into that pin. All right, so P13, P15. Okay, so now let's look at how we're going to program it. So I'm starting with the program where I was already getting my light data and my air data. Right, so I've got all of those variables already set, and I'm just going to move these guys out of the way for right now, because what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to need to get an extension that's going to allow me to connect up to my Wi-Fi. So I'm going to go to Advanced, I'm going to go down to Extensions, and here I'm going to type in the word Grove, okay, and I'm going to search. So what we need is this Grove Inventor Seed Studio modular package. All right, so we're going to click on that, and you should get an icon that looks like a, kind of like a 3 little cubes stacked on each other, Grove, because these are all called Grove sensors. They're part of the Grove sensor set, and it installs lots of other options. Right, it installs the ultrasonic, the gesture, being able to do a joystick, but it also installs the Wi-Fi. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use these components to enable us to send data to the Wi-Fi. All right, so let's get going. All right, so I've got my files kind of reorganized. Now, one of the first things we're going to need is we're going to need to initialize or turn on the Wi-Fi in our on start menu. So we just installed the Grove extension, right? And inside that Grove extension, as I scroll down, is my UART Wi-Fi chip. So what I'm going to need to do is set up my Wi-Fi. Okay. So we're going to leave the defaults for the transmission. That means we're going to transmit on P15. We're going to receive on P13. We want to make sure that those are P15, P13. You can leave the baud rate the same. That's just the speed. And if you're on, a Wi-Fi wireless, right, that should be more than sufficient. Then what you'll need to do is type in your internet password. So here, this is the one that we use in some locations. So whatever your internet name is and what your password to that is, that's what you're going to type in there. Okay, and it'll automatically fill in the quotation marks. But this is important because this is setting up our Wi-Fi. So that is step 1. Now step 2, we need to have a sense for what it is that we're going to send. Okay, so just like before, I'm going to make a separate function for my Wi-Fi, and I'm going to call my Wi-Fi send data. So now I've got my data function. First thing I want to do is I want to know if my Wi-Fi has been found. And this can be useful in case you're someplace and you might be logging in where you don't have a password, but it might have something where you have to log in and the web browser does something like that. Or you just typed in the password wrong, or the SSID, the name of the Wi-Fi wrong, and it's not finding it. So it can be a little hard to find. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up a logic block here first. And so I'm going to just drag over my logic, if true then. Now what I want to know is my Wi-Fi okay? And so under my Wi-Fi block, I've got this little block that says Wi-Fi, right? So if my Wi-Fi is okay, then I'm going to want to do stuff, okay? If it's not, I'm going to do something else. Okay? So let's just have a little indicator. What I'm going to do on my OLED screen, I'm going to just put in a little show string here, and I'm just going to say sending data. That will be my first indicator that my Wi-Fi is okay if I see these words show up on my screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the program here for about a second or so. So let's say 2 seconds. So the sending data will show up on the screen long enough for me to notice it. And then I'm just going to clear it off the screen. Because all I really want that indicator to do is say, hey, I'm actually sending the data. Okay. Now, what we're going to do next is be able to set this data up so we can send it to a ThingSpeak channel. And ThingSpeak is the website that the data is going to get streamed to. So again, I go to my little Grove block, okay, and I'm just going to send my data to the ThingSpeak. And notice there's a typo in the block. It says ThingSpeak instead of ThingSpeak, right? But it's the same one. Send data to your ThingSpeak channel. And now what we're going to end up doing is you're going to get a API, and we'll talk about how you get that. So it's a special number that you're going to have when you log into ThingSpeak. So this is my API key, so it's going to send the data. Now, and it's going to send it to my account. So kind of think of these numbers as the separate, ways we're going to keep the greenhouses apart. So that's going to be my API key. Okay. Now, with the fields, these are the pieces of data that we're going to want to send. And now it's actually pretty easy because we've got our program all set up. And why we made all those variables in the first part. So I'm going to have my field 1 variable. It's going to send the air temperature. All right. Field 2, it's going to send my humidity. Okay. And maybe in field 3, it's going to send my lux value. Okay. All right. So if I have other things, like if I have my water temperature sensor or other pieces of data that I want to be able to send, that's where you'll put it in. And notice you're going to have to send up to 8 pieces of data. So we're just right now going to send air temperature, humidity, light readings. Okay. Now, in the else block, oops, I accidentally hit an else if, but we really only need an else. Okay. So in my else block, this is where I'm going to say, the Wi-Fi is not okay. So what I want to do is I want to show a string, and I'm going to say not connected to the internet. All right. And maybe I want another indicator that maybe on my microbit itself, I'm going to have a little X icon or some indicator that I know that means that I'm not connected to the internet. Okay. All right. So now that's my function send data. Now all that I have to do now is to make sure that my send data function is in the forever loop. So I just go to functions, and I'm going to drag my call send data, and I'm going to put it at the end. Okay. And so right now my forever loop says call, get my kind of variables. These are my fixed variables. Remember, these are high and air temp, high humidity, and low lux values. I'm going to get me some data. I'll show that data on the screen. Right. Then I'm going to control my fan. I'll control my lights, and I'll get some light data, and I'll control my grow lights. Right. Then I'm going to send all that data to the internet. Okay. So let's go look at ThingSpeak and figure out how it is that we want to set up ThingSpeak to be able to collect the data from my program.